Well, in other news, today in the High Court in Joburg, the ANC been replying to the arguments brought by Ace Magashule as he tries to overturn his suspension as Secretary-General. The ANC says there's no way that Magashule's arguments can be suspended, that it has the right to suspend someone in this way, and that his attempt to suspend President Cyril Ramaphosa as leader of the ANC was dishonest. Sanusha Naidu is a political analyst. Professor Sethulego Matebetsi, also a political analyst at the University of the Free State. Professor good afternoon to you both. Professor Matebetsi, let me start with you this afternoon. Very strong arguments being presented legally. Politically, the question might be this. If Ace Magashule wins and returns to Luthuli House, would he still have the political power he did before he was suspended?
Hi, good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to the viewers. Well, hypothetically, that would send a strong message to the Ace Magashule camp. Actually, for me, that will embolden the campaign of Magashule and his aspiration to become the president. I know he has not made any public pronouncement about this, but I know that someone like Ace Magashule will definitely have aspiration to become the president of the African National Congress. I think it will put a huge dent into what Cyril Ramaphosa, as the leader of the African National Congress, and those who support him have been trying to do, not only within the African National Congress, but also fighting corruption and at least saving South African taxpayers' money and fighting malfeasance in the public service.
I mean, judgment's now been reserved in this case. Sanusha Naidu, how do you see it? The chances are that we will get a judgment in, I don't know when, let's call it a few weeks. The chances are whoever loses appeals. This could actually go on for quite some time. The longer it goes on, is that bad for Ace Magashule?
Good afternoon, Stephen, Prof, and the viewers. I think you're right. I think the point here is whatever happens in terms of the judgment itself, is going to be one that's going to be taken on appeal. And let's also be cognizant of the fact that Ace Magashule has another court date in August regarding the asbestos issue. And that also will be a protracted one. So down the line, I think that the way in which this has structurally unfolded in terms of whether the court processes, the judicial process, will enable Ace Magashule to kind of have an expedited victory is going to be very difficult, because I think he stands to lose more, because as he's outside of the party and he's no longer in the office of the SG, which has also been not just about Ace Magashule and the factionalism and the fact that he's suspended. It's also been other internal structures that have been held back by him in that office. It's continuing to go. For example, what the Treasurer General is talking about now with regard to the salaries question and doing a kind of strategic review around, trying to get people that are aligning their capabilities, capacities, and their job description, fitting it in terms of what's happening within the party. From 2019, that has been a kind of stumbling block because it couldn't happen with the SG's office pushing back. Now, all of that is still going to happen in the party. The party is still going to have that functionalism take place. That means that Ace Magashule is really, his go-to strategy is to keep fanning the flames outside of the party, and particularly in the province or the branches where he still may have the kind of support he destines himself to have.
Professor Matebetsi, I mean, you also have the situation where the Deputy Secretary-General, Jessie Duarte, has been the person who's deposed to the main affidavits in this case on behalf of the ANC. Now, I'm sure, Jessie Duarte now, if Ace Magashule were to come back, they would have to work together. I'm battling to see how that would work out in a constructive fashion.
Stephen, if both of us were politicians, the moment we end this interview, we would have seen a totally, completely different situation. That's the nature of politics, very unpredictable. Within a minute, our political scene can change so much. I like what Naidu said there about the branches. Remember also, Ace Magashule had oversight over what was happening in the branches, and your branches, your provinces at the end of the day will be decisive when it comes to the elective conference of the African National Congress. And I think that is also very crucial, the outcome of this court case. But coming back to your question about the working relationship between the current acting or so-called Deputy Secretary General. I mean, if I look at the posture of the top six for the past 2 years, already one could see, I've never seen, ever since the elective conference, the Secretary General of the African National Congress sitting next to the President. I've never seen that publicly happening. So that already tells you. And by the way, we should also know that the ANC officials have been meeting virtually. So they would have to work together for the sake of the organization. But I strongly believe that all these underhanded shenanigans of the political game will still continue, where people are testing their strengths of the different factions. For the sake of the organization, they will be forced to work together. But I know that there will be a lot of contestation between the two individuals.
Sanusha, we're going into a local government election, well, one is still currently scheduled for the end of October. If Ace Magashule were to come back as the Secretary-General, what image does that send to voters? What does it do to opposition parties who will make claims about the ANC? I mean, this is an election issue as well in some ways.
Indeed, Stephen, and I think you're right in the sense that if he comes back, and again, it's all dependent on what happens in the judicial process. If he comes back, again, the challenge would be what kind of optics you send. Because I think for the branches that have supported him and the three parties that wanted to be part of this court case, who then had their application dismissed with cost, I think that's where we've got to see some of the traction, some of the galvanization of how Ace Magashule may push himself forward in terms of the election process. But let's assume, if we play out scenarios, let's assume he comes back just on the cusp of the election, say, for argument's sake, on the 1st of October. For me, I'm a little bit more less optimistic that he is going to come back by the elections, that he is going to be galvanizing his support base, because I think the other challenge here is that the organizational restructure that's happening, the strategic review, the kind of what's going on in the Treasury's office, in Paul Mashatele's office, and what's happening there, it could very well be that if or when Ace Magashule comes back into the ANC, depending all things are equal, he may end up coming to a very different ANC that has gone through its strategic review, has gone through an institutional organizational reorganization. It could be that certain, we saw this with the MK vets. We saw the disbanding of some of these constituencies. So it could be something very different he comes into, which may then also be not playing into his kind of strategic orientation and purpose and what he thinks is the way in which he wants to push himself for 2022 and beyond. So I think for me, the challenge here is not to think about it in terms of, is he going to win the case or is he not going to win the case? Is he going to appeal? You must remember that there's a strategic sense that I'm getting from within the party that while Ace Magashule is out, we are going to start moving forward in this organizational renewal.
Professor Matebetsi, there's a bigger question about our politics I want to ask. And it's not so much about the law, though the law is part of it. There's a judgment that's been quoted in this case. It's called the Ramaphosa case, and it was a case brought by Paul Ramaphosa against the ANC in 2012. And Ramaphosa won that case. It was against the ANC in the Free State. It's sort of the definitive judgment on how organizations work. And the person who lost was Ace Magashule. Now, Ace Magashule's lawyer, Advocate Dali Mpofu, is quoting that case now in defense of Ace Magashule. So you have that on one side. Never mind the legalities of it, but just have that. Outside court yesterday, not today, but yesterday, you had people gathering to support Ace Magashule, despite the fact we're in the middle of a third wave of COVID-19. There's a theatre of 3 people trying to get into the case, who really don't seem to have any bearing on the case. The judges denied their applications to get involved. What does all of this theatre say about our politics?
Quite interesting. I also pick up, you mentioned that in one of your shows also yesterday, But I'm a sociologist. I think that we should leave the interpretation of that to the legal gurus. But as a South African, I can make a case about this. And what this tells me, I don't even want to talk about the legal team currently representing the current Secretary General. But the case that I want to make is that this is the nature of South African politics. There's absolutely no consequence management. As long as you can protect your skin, irrespective of what means you use, whether you go to the same legal representative that in the past took out the stick to show you to do the right thing. 10, 15 years down the line, you can go to that very same legal representative and ask him to advance your case. That is the nature of South African politics. That is what is happening currently, where we still need a chief executive officer, and I mean a president, who will one day wake up and say, today I am putting forward, and yeah, I don't necessarily refer to our current president. We haven't had a president who is so bold enough to come and say, today I am putting South Africans first, let alone all the internal fights within my party. And to a certain extent, I'm also referring to the current sitting president. I think a lot of what is currently happening within the African National Congress has to do with some people. I've seen some commentators refer to this as political posturing. We don't need that. South African leadership, and we don't need leadership tomorrow. We need leadership today. But this is what is happening. As long as I can sell a story, go out in the public in defense of the so-called hands-off phenomenon, irrespective of the consequences, then let it be. And that is unfortunately the current nature of South African politics. And for me, that has to do with consequence management. Nobody is taking responsibility for their actions in our current political landscape.
Professor Sethulego, Matebetsi, Sanusha, Naidu, thank you very much both for your comments and your contributions this afternoon. It's an important story. Judgment being reserved in that argument. We'll wait for the judgment when it comes from the High Court sitting